Not sure if I'm muted yet. Unmuted. Started. Not started. Begin. All right, here we go. So I wanted to first of all thank everybody for joining us at this amazing time and this amazing opportunity to connect, to study a little bit, to learn some Torah, and we're sitting in the wonderful world of the coronavirus, which is not wonderful, but it really allows and shows us sort of the opportunity that is upon us to take advantage of the life in front of us and take advantage of the time that we have and to be truly intentional about this time in our lives, which is very important because it's good to be intentional about what you're doing in your life. So what I wanted to dive into today to discuss if is this idea of the unique selling proposition of Judaism. Now, to give you a basic overview of what we're going to be discussing today, I first wanted to isolate and show the problem, to show the issue. Like, why would we have such a discussion? Seemingly, for those very religious people in the audience, it's obvious what the unique selling proposition of Judaism is. Of course, I would bounce back and ask you that question. What is it? So let's look from a 30,000-foot view, speak out a couple of the different ideas, the different problems, and go from there. Step number one is like this. We live in a world which, for really one of the first times in history, we've radically broken from the social expectations of the past, in the sense that previously people had sort of a tribe that they belonged to and work that they did and sort of a path in life that they could go. And really, not to give people a brief history of the world, but certainly in the middle to later part of the 1900s, 2000s, obviously, with the rise of technology, people's whole world broke down. And also the rise of colleges, and that everyone goes to college. It wasn't like at 18, 19, 20, we were sort of plugged into what we were going to do in our life, but rather we were opened up. I remember having a conversation with my mom, of which it's important to speak to your mothers. That's your Jewish lesson of the day, right? Where I was talking to her about how the structure that I sort of looked for in my life when I was 18, because I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. I thought I would want to be a rabbi, I wasn't sure, right? Was kind of exacerbated by the fact that I went to college, because college sort of gives you this broad, wide open spectrum, and most people graduate college not knowing what they want to do and not having a clarity any more than when they went in. But they've been exposed to all these different ideas, and it's like, okay, so what do I figure out? And then most people, again, at the end of college or the end of grad school, go into the workforce a little bit, and now they're 35 years old, whatever you want to say, and then they start the process that most people, our ancestors, were starting 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. So there's this great existential crisis where the how do you want to say it, where people don't know what they want to do. People are much more in a path where they have to kind of figure it out on their own. And the reason why that's highly challenging is there's not really the tools per se that people have at their disposal to figure it out. So that being said, also the expectations socially that are upon a person also really kind of goes down, because we don't know it at this point. We can sort of pick our social groups. One of the amazing things about the advent of the internet and technology is that we can create a connection around sort of whatever we want to do, which is, on one hand, is great, because then the ability to connect becomes sort of like on our own. On the flip side, the problem is that there's no structure, overarching structure in our life that sort of tells us which direction to go. I hope I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. The idea, I just had a dear friend of mine today bring up this idea. I thought I coined the phrase, but apparently not, right? Of a quarter life crisis, that when you're 23, 24, 25, you reach this like, well, what am I supposed to do? And there's this mission that we all sort of want. And the broadness, so to speak, of social media sort of implies that there's a lot of people out there that know what they want to do. Because again, the nature of what social media is that we are consistently sort of putting out our highlight reels. And so we're all seeing everybody's highlight reels. So when we look, again, it's such a fascinating idea. If you think about the life that we used to live, right? So people would see the farmers, and your father would be a farmer, your mother would be a farmer, if you want, equal opportunity farming, right? And you just sort of like were surrounded by people living normal lives. But with social media, what you see is the upper crust. So you're not comparing yourself. You don't see the Instagram or the what's it called, the LinkedIn of the middle of the road farmer, right? But you only see the Elon Musks or the guys that have taken their farming industry and blown it up to multiple $billion. And so there's this general crisis when it comes to structure, and a general crisis when it comes to meaning. And we don't know. And also, again, oftentimes, the media is great at helping us think that the situation we're in right now is like unique in world history. And it's like, Jews have never been so uneducated. And I don't know if that's true. But, we also have this concept that we have grown up, and nowadays so many people don't really understand that much about their heritage, or frankly even why they should connect to their heritage, because the predominant idea nowadays is that we see, if you look at technology, like who wants an old iPhone, right? Do you want an old iPhone? I don't want. I have an iPhone XR, right? No, 11. I'm sorry, I have an 11, right? Not the Pro, but I have an 11, and I would never want to go back to an iPhone X. I don't even want to go to an iPhone Pro. I'm only thinking, how do I get the iPhone 12, right? So we live in a world where, by definition, because of the way that technology has accustomed us, that the idea of going back and sort of going to the root of something is highly unpalatable. So we then fall into, again, we're just going to speak candidly if that's okay, we fall into why should a person choose? Why should a person choose Judaism? Why is that important? And granted, I know that sounds like a very inappropriate question, because for most people that grew up in a Jewish structure, you could never ask a question like, should I be Jewish? Why should I be Jewish? We were kind of guilted into being Jewish, or we were expected to be Jewish. And when you ask these big, esoteric, fundamental questions, especially to your parents who are deeply, invested in your success and want the best from you, and might maybe not have thought about these things before. So then the problem is that they're like, well, you have to do it, right? And the question is like, well, why? Why do I have to do it? And if I would even push even further, maybe I don't have to do it, and maybe I shouldn't do it, right? And so there's this challenge. How do we figure out why or what or how we should be Jewish? Now, on the flip side, and on a deep level, right? As Jews, most Jews, I don't even know if that's true, but people are proud of where they come from. People are proud of who you are. One thing that I would say without question is, if you ask most people, again, who cares, most people, the people that will be watching this per se, we're proud of our Jewish heritage. We're proud of who we are. We're proud of our legacy. You think about Adam Sandler, so to speak, Seth Godin, Seth Rogen, whatever you want, depending on where you are. You look at people, Steven Schwartzman, you look at these people and you're like, yeah, that guy's Jewish, I'm Jewish, it's cool, it's all good. That was the whole reason why the Hanukkah song became such a Jewish national anthem in the, whatever it was, the 1990s, I guess it was, is because it's randomly just kind of like creating a cultural identity amongst people who are proud of where they come from or who they are and the group that they're a part of. And okay, great, that's something. That's definitely something. But the question is ultimately like, what does it mean? And again, I'm going to speak very candidly because we're all friends and why not? But when a person would say, why are you Jewish? Like, what makes you Jewish? Again, leaving out the bloodline concept, leaving out the social identification concept, most people that we bump into nowadays would say, I'm socially Jewish. I'm culturally Jewish. It's the best word ever, culturally Jewish. And of course, I always push back on that because I say, well, what do you do that makes you culturally Jewish? And most people will say, well, I celebrate the holidays, okay? Or I believe in my family, or I like Israel, or whatever it might be. Now, again, that's fascinating because that's not culture, okay? That's not culture at all. Culture is, again, this is where's the shirt? I think this is Calvin Klein, right? My shirt's Calvin Klein shirt, right? That's so. If you think about like, what does that mean? Why am I bringing that up? Because if you think about what is culture, culture is usually your mode of dress. It's usually the kind of music you listen to. It's kind of usually the activities you choose to do. And so for the majority of Jews that would classify themselves as culturally Jewish, so the idea is that what they do culturally Jewish is not Jewish at all. Their culture, their clothing is usually wherever they come from, right? American. I'm saying I don't think of what's a Jewish outfit, right? Again, hopefully maybe there's ideas of modesty and ideas of looking nice, which are halachic, which are legal, but certainly most of us dress according to the culture that we come from, right? You're going to wear different styles depending even what region of the world, or what country you're from, or what state you're from, right? So that's one idea. The kind of the music we listen to. Again, is there Jewish music? Yes, of course, there's great Jewish music, but a lot of Jews who consider themselves cultural Jews don't necessarily listen to Jewish music, and they like other kinds of music. What I don't have to go to go into that here, right? But then you say, and what kind of activities do you like, right? What's a Jewish activity? What's a Jewish like fun thing to do? And it's like, well, not sure. And most Jews that are quote culturally Jewish are enjoying American culture or Israeli culture. You like soccer, you like football, UFC, whatever it might be, sports, not sports. You figure it out. But cultural Judaism doesn't really exist because the people that identify, theoretically speaking, as culturally Jewish are not actually doing anything that's culturally Jewish, right? They're culturally wherever they're from. And the things that we think is as culturally Jewish, the holidays, connection to Israel, the family, the lineage, the shared history, that stuff's all in the Bible, right? So that's really interesting because that's not cultural whatsoever. That's actually deeply religious, if you would. That's actually straight out of the text. Now, granted, maybe it's not celebrated according to the halachic guidelines, but all of the things that we oftentimes think is culturally Jewish are actually religiously Jewish, and we're actually culturally wherever we come from, which is fascinating because to a certain extent, Judaism doesn't have a culture, right? Israeli has a culture. Different sects of different Jews might have culture, but that's all like generated from inside. There's no like mass Jewish culture. When I met my first, I met my best friend who's half Persian. I never met until I came to college. Forgive me, I never met a Persian Jew before, and so I didn't understand that there was a whole like another sect of Jews or group of Jews that never heard of that don't really eat gefilte fish and that listen to different music and eat different foods. And I was like, I thought again, it just shows how myopic our viewpoints are, but as we've grown up and sort of looked at a more broad general world, we can appreciate that there's really not a Jewish culture because every Jewish group looks like their own unique side. And the people that don't really have that connection look like wherever they're from. So then it becomes a question of why be Jewish? Why do we choose to be Jewish? Could you even choose to be Jewish, right? So that's also an interesting question. But on a fundamental level, and again, this was an early question that I started grappling with long before I had for a long time was I had joined when I was in college a Jewish fraternity, API, which was the Jewish fraternity. Sorry for anyone else that would find that offensive, but I joined a Jewish fraternity, and one of the things that we were always working on is what does it mean to be a Jewish fraternity, and very early on, again long before I studied anything having to do with business or anything like that, there was a debate of what is the nature. Again, I don't know if other non-Jewish fraternities have these kinds of problems, but it seemed like a very fundamentally Jewish issue is the Jewish fraternity questioning what makes us Jewish. And so then we tried and we said, well, maybe we'll try to compete in the sports arena. Maybe we'll try to compete in the leadership arena. Maybe we'll try to compete. Of course, we always competed in the grades arena, right? But the interesting point that I became aware of and I started advocating for, again, long before I was rabbi or anything that I do now, was that we should figure out what makes, when we talk to Rashis, right? When we speak to prospects, so to speak, and we talk about why join a Jewish fraternity, the idea that we should sell is not the academics, is not the sports, is not the social function, because I hate to say it, but most cases, academics were better, and we did pretty good in sports when I was in the fraternity. But in general, that's not what we're good at. Why people join a Jewish fraternity is because they want something Jewish, right? So the question would be, right, what is that? And how do you dig into that? And I think, again, for people that are in various levels of business or even for themselves, right, when they're thinking about where I want to go with my own life, rather than try to figure out how do I compete at the vast overall world and try to overdo them, which again, nowadays with the internet, you can't do it, right? You'll never be sort of, again, it's just a crazy idea. These are all infinite games. You're never going to find, you might have good grades for your class, for your school, but if you put it against an international background, you're never going to win, right? So the question becomes, what makes me unique? And what can I personally bring to the table that other people might not? And so it switches the question from how do we define ourselves, so to speak, as, again, it's a crazy thing. It's like, people think, well, what does it mean to be Jewish? Or what's our unique selling proposition? Morals. We have morals. And you're like, excuse me, that's so offensive because you're saying that other people don't have morals. You say, we give charity. It's like, dude, a lot of other religious people give charity. A lot of people that aren't religious give charity. There are people that give more charity than you, right? So don't think that we own charity or we own morals. And a lot of people say, okay, well, again, most of the platitudes when people are thinking, what is Judaism's unique selling proposition? Other people do it. It's not unique. We do it like everybody else. So then it becomes a fundamental question, well, then why should I do whatever it is I do? Why should I identify, so to speak, with the Jewish people? Why should I identify with Judaism? What makes that unique? Hopefully that question is clear. I'm just going to trace the bouncing ball back from the beginning of the question. We started with a question of what is it's called the USP, unique selling proposition. So it's like when you try to, again, one more time, the context of this question is that we live in a world where you can choose. We live in a great world of choice, of permission, right? So it's not like more and more, or it's even over, you're not going to be able to guilt people into doing anything. You might not be able to twist people's arms to go into anything. You can't really lie to people because now we have such a broad amount of information that people can get all of the background. Again, it's not like buying a car is not what it used to, in the sense that you know what cars cost. And it's not like you're, trying to figure out like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's like you have the internet. You have access to a wide variety of information. So we now live in a world of permission and we live in a world of choosing. And so when you're dealing with that world, rather than trying to guilt someone into doing it, you have to actually articulate what is, again, USP. What is your unique selling proposition? If that makes sense, which is, why should I buy from you and not buy from somebody else? And I think obviously if you're advocating for other people to consider Judaism, or again, just like, let's be very personal for ourselves, when we're saying, why should I be Jewish? You have to advocate for what we actually do and what's unique, as opposed to try to guilt or make people scared of not being identified. Again, it's like people say, well, federation funding is going to go down. And it's like, okay, well, if I don't care about the federation, I'm not saying I don't, but if people don't, then what's the big deal? Or people are going to say, well, you're going to forget the Holocaust. And like most people, they're like, well, if they don't care about it already, that doesn't going to bring them back in, right? Or they just put the Holocaust contextualized against all the other world suffering, and it's like, that doesn't make Jews Jewish anymore, right? We had like a 50, 60-year window where people were primarily associated, identified with Judaism because of the Holocaust, because of Israel. And both of those are no longer terribly compelling reasons for people that don't have the automatic buy-in, so to speak, that this is a Jewish religious issue, calling it what it is. So then we go back. There's something called unique selling proposition. Unique selling proposition is, what do we do well? What do we offer to the world that other things don't, that other movements don't, that other thoughts and philosophies don't? And that's a very fundamental question that's very important. And again, we're not talking to an uneducated audience. Most of the people who we talk to, especially ourselves, are worldly people, and they know what else is out there. Right? So like, why come check us out? And instead of trying to appeal and say, hey, we have cooler services, or hey, there are wealthy Jews, or we run the world, or whatever people try to, like pass off as like a good reason for why you should join the club, so to speak. Why don't we say like what we actually provide? Now the answer is there's a lot of those. I'm going to identify a couple of them and why they're relevant. First, let's go retroactively. I'm just picking this one out of my hat, and also because, which again, it's a small hat, right? But relevant for the season, the Passover season, which is a profound idea that really moved me, right? So we deal a practical problem that people deal with is people want purpose, people need purpose, and we see, again, Jewish guy, but didn't necessarily have to be, not necessarily the Jewish idea. Viktor Frankl speaks about man's search for meaning, that if a person have a why, which is not him, that was someone else actually says this, but if a person has a why, they can tolerate any how. And what Viktor Frankl spoke about is this idea that we that if we're able to define why we do something, or if we have a purpose, if we have a meaning, so then our life works better. And if we don't, we go into a dark place. So people need meaning. Fantastic. Now, does it mean that if you don't have Judaism, you don't have meaning? No, that's not what it means. There are all kinds of people that have meaning in their life and don't even know what Judaism is, right? So we don't corner the market on meaning, right? And there's plenty of Jews that don't feel like they have any meaning to their life, and they're just going through this. They're just going through the motions. So let's try this specifically. Let's just try this, and I'm going to show you. This is a profoundly deep concept. We're going to try to develop it. We're going to try to develop it over the next 12 minutes, and we'll think about it. And we don't need to throw more stuff on. How's that? There's an idea. It says in Passover, because of this, and you're supposed to point to the matzah, that God took us out of Egypt. Because of this, point to the matzah, God took us out of Egypt. That's a throwaway line. It's not a throwaway line. That's one of the unique selling propositions of Judaism. I get so excited about this. And again, there's going to be a couple of questions that are going to pop out of this, but let me just present to you what this means. We live in a world where we have a struggle between something called moral relevant. Well, look at that. It's moral relativism and absolutism, right? So on one hand, what does it mean to be moral relativism? Which is how I would say most people, without really thinking about it, fall to, which is what's good for me is good for me, and what's good for you is good for you, and I'm not going to tell you what to do, and you don't tell me what to do, and very good. And again, there's an abundance of psychological and biological data that also says that we think the way we think because of how we're programmed, or we think the way we think because of how we are initially predisposed. You're going to see one of the great things. Again, I'm going to pretend that I'm not. We can all pretend that we're like the super rabbis, but the reality is our kids don't have school, and so we can be on an international code, and we will just be putting in passwords, and then the kids will scream, and everyone's having a great time. Thank you so much. Namaste. Again, not Jewish. The door's open. We'll go with it. Anyway, so there's a basic idea. There's a basic concept here that we're going to try to tie us back to, which is we have a sense of there's this moral relativism where we think it is what it is, etc. There's also this absolutism, right, where we think, well, there are absolute rights and wrongs. Then it becomes very challenging. How do we relate those kinds of ideas, right? So the problem with moral relativism is if it's just up to me, then I can't advocate really anything on an international, even something like ending world poverty or justice, something like that. If it's just up to me and the other person doesn't believe it, okay, so it's just whatever. On the flip side, if I say there is an absolute, so then it begs the question, well, who makes me in charge? Or is it the UN that's in charge? Eventually you get to an idea that really only the creator can create absolutes. That's a big deal. I'm not going to go into it now because it's a whole other thing, and I'm sure there's other people that would love to just jump into that. But basically the idea of can I be good without God? Good is a relative term. So you need an absolute standard, right, of which to compare good to in order for you to start to answer that question. And so most people want to be good, but most people don't want absolutes. And it's like, well, okay, how's that supposed to work? Think about it. We'll get back to it maybe next week. Step number one is we want meaning. And so meaning requires a couple of things. First of all, it means that I have to have a clear purpose with what I'm doing. There has to be a right and a wrong, an absolute structure by which I can know is what I'm doing important, right? And this is a famous idea because one of the ways that, again, this is an Egyptian idea, and they did this in the gulags, right? The idea of psychologically breaking a person by showing them that the efforts they do is useless. So again, famously, there's an argument in the Talmud that the Jews in Egypt, right, when they left Pitom and Ramses, the cities they were building, it was either built on a fault line, or it was built on a very active fault line, or it was built in quicksand. And so the psychological trauma of the Jews was that as they were going home each night, they would look behind and see all the things they busted their backs on all day long falling into the ground. It's like you start and it just ends. And that's the idea also. They would try to have children, the women would carry to term, and the Egyptians would try to kill their children. Why is that such an idea? Because it's psychologically, it destroys you. Because there's no upward mobility. It's just every day you're back to zero. It's like you're literally living in a Groundhog Day. So people need a sense in order to live with the idea that what they're doing is actually matters and it's making a difference. Even if your whole thing is like chipping away a piece of wood to make something. And if you have the clarity that this is the most important thing you could be doing at this point, right? Again, we spoke a little bit previously in another class about intention. If you have the intention, if you have the understanding that carving this piece of wood is the most important thing on earth, then you will put all of your effort into doing it, right? So in order for us to have meaning, we have to have an absolute set of values. We have to have this idea that the absolute set of values could tell us what to do, right? If I know, so to speak, that the whole purpose of, let's just go into like a class, I'm in a classroom environment, and I know what I need to do to get an A, but I never have the tools to do it or the knowledge of how to get an A, right away I've disconnected from meaning. I go into like a tailspin of nothingness because I don't know how to do it. So even if there is an absolute standard, you must complete project X in order to get an A. Even if we have that, but I don't have the capacity, I don't have the tools, I don't have the wherewithal, I don't have the knowledge to do it, so then it becomes even worse because we feel absolutely terrible of ourselves, like, why can't I just do what I need to do? And the answer is like, and again, it goes down a very dark psychological path. Not for now, but just if you can think deeply about these kinds of ideas, this is where so many, again, mental health is such a big topic, but this is like where so many things break down for so many people. It's like, why are you miserable? It's either that I don't know, I have no clarity around what I'm supposed to be doing right now, I'm having a midlife crisis, or it's I know where I think I'm supposed to go, or I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't have the ability to do that, and I'm not making any traction towards getting there. Right? So then that also is another level on top that freaks you out and creates a level of psychological trauma. Does that make sense? It's like, again, basically, imagine a parent tells the kid, you have to work hard and be successful, but then doesn't tell the kid, what does that actually mean? Or a parent says, you have to be a grown-up and then I'll give you something. I'll get you in the next stage of life. But they don't define what it is. The kid doesn't feel like they can do it. So even if you know what to do, but you can't do it, you don't have enough help, you don't have enough opportunity, like, you'll break. So it's like multiple levels. On the first level, again, level number one, is there an absolute standard by which we're supposed to be doing something? Question, yes or no. On the second point, can we be sure, do we have the ability, do we have the understanding of how to actually do that? Which is also something very interesting. So if we don't have an absolute standard and we don't have the tools and capacity to do those things, so then it starts to break down for people this sense of meaning. And then we're lost. And then we're depressed. And then we throw stuff at the wall and it doesn't work, and then we get upset at ourselves and all that kind of stuff. The final thing is, when should I do it? When should I do it? What's the opportunity to do it? So let's say I know there's how to get an A in a class. I also know I can do that. But maybe if there's, again, and this is hard for us because we are in such a driver's seat in our lives nowadays, which is an interesting idea. Again, it's like, when is the ideal time to start a family? When is the ideal time to start a career? How much background do you need? Do you need to go to, grad school for this? Do you need to go to college for this? Should you just go out and work and get experience? Should you have a family before you start work? Should you work and then start a family? What if you work really hard and then you miss having a family? What if you have a family and then you miss the opportunity to jump in, when you don't have a lot of overhead? So we live in an existential world of crisis of time nowadays because, like, how do we know when to do something? So again, just practically speaking, 3 levels of tremendous anxiety is created for people. Again, we went into this one thing. What is the unique selling proposition of Judaism? Well, let's look at one example, right? We said this idea of meaning. And in order for a person to have meaning, you need 3 things, really. You need to know what to do. You need to have the capacity and knowledge and ability to do it. And then you have to know when you're supposed to do it, right? Because again, is it meaningful to have a job? And the answer is like, yes. Is that something that you should be doing when you're 5 years old? No, theoretically speaking. Right? Or 10 years old, or 100 years old, right? Like, when do you start? And so the fascinating thing is, all in one small line of the Haggadah is this idea. We say, because of this, and you're supposed to point to the matzah, that God took my ancestors out of Egypt. Let's watch what that means specifically. Because of this, you point to the matzah, God took us out of Egypt. Watch this. Amazing. Think about it. Step number 1. God's existence is the absolute structure by which everything makes sense. So even though we don't, and again, period. So if the world is happenstance, if the world doesn't have a purpose, if the world doesn't have an ultimate structure, right? So then really everything starts to break down at the beginning. That's why Einstein was famous for saying that it was really religion, right, that taught us how to build science, because science is predicated on the idea that I can understand the world, that the world is fixed, right? The world is finite, that the world is understandable. And so if you don't have God who kind of tells you how the world functions, so to speak, or that there is a function to the world, everything falls apart. Now again, even people that don't believe in God are in line with this vision, because everyone still acts as if there is structure to the world, right? Everyone gets dressed and goes to work. Everybody, does not pours their coffee in their mouth and not just throws it on their chest, unless they do it by accident, right? We have structure in the world. We act as if there's structure, right? And so God provides the intrinsic structure for the world. And then on top of it, right, there's an idea that God told us what to do, that God outlined for humanity, how do you live a successful life, which again is a major issue, because if a person doesn't have that clarity and doesn't know if the decisions they make are actually good or actually bad, there's no concept of that. So then again, even if there's structure to your life, there's no real meaning to your life, because you don't know if what you're doing is advancing humanity, advancing yourself, advancing where you want to go at all. Now, a lot of people might say, well, who cares? Just enjoy the journey. And it's like, yeah, maybe. But what if the journey's not making you have fun, right? Again, I like health coach stuff, right? So it's like, how many chocolate chip cookies are you going to eat before you start? And again, it is instantaneously pleasurable, no question there. But eventually you're going to start to feel this overarching sense of, God, I'm unhealthy, I'm upset, I'm weak, I'm fat, whatever you might want to do. So the question is, is there a structure, a knowable structure to reality? And so that's the second piece. So first of all, is there a God? There's God. God provides the absolute answer that there is structure to the world. The second point is that life has a purpose, it's meaningful, right? There is a value to that. Again, think about how much clarity that provides for a person's life. We shouldn't have the Jewish unique selling proposition for the world. One of the things is that your life matters. Your life has purpose. Do other people believe that? Absolutely. But it all has to fall back to these basic principles, right? These basic principles. There's a God, which is, again, a Jewish idea. Not to say that other people don't believe in it, but Abraham, who was not Jewish, but one of the four founders of the Jewish people, brought this idea of ethical monotheism. Again, he didn't teach the world there's one God, because obviously Adam and Noah and everyone before that was only talking to one God, but really he was the master marketer that brought that to the world. And then the second point about ethical monotheism, he also said that God cares what we do. So you can't just go stabbing children. Don't do that. Go to jail for that, right? That's bad. So step number one is there's an absolute structure. Step number two is that we can know what we have to do in order to live a good and meaningful life. And then the fascinating thing about this Seder is that we point to the matzah, and the whole point is we're eating matzah now. So now is the time to do it, which means that it shrinks the time window into this. This is like super deep, and think about it, please. It shrinks the time window from the esoteric, I sort of know what to do, but I don't know when to do it, into what should I do right now. So that's the whole idea. We have this idea in Judaism called mitzvot, and mitzvot are always dependent on factors. So time, space, location, right? All of these different things. So what's a time-bound commandment, so to speak? So it would be, let's say you're supposed to pray, right? You're supposed to pray before a certain hour. So if you look at your clock and it's 8 in the morning, right? And you haven't prayed yet, and you kind of know what to do. So the idea, I'm telling you, this is a game changer. It's amazing. It's context. Context is everything, right? So Judaism, the final step, this idea of the Seder, is it provides us context. So rather than say, I could do a million things that are meaningful, it's a matter of sort of looking and trying to figure out what's going on right now, and that becomes your primary responsibility. It's an idea of learning how to organize and structure what you do based on what's going on right now. I'm going to give you an example of that, and again, I'm going for 3 more minutes, then it's over, right? So the idea is that first and foremost, right? What does it mean that we need context? So the idea is Seder night, the night of the Seder. If it's that night, you're supposed to eat matzah. What is matzah? We know what it is. When are you supposed to do it? We know that. So a person could sit down on the Seder night and have clarity that there's an absolute structure to reality. The absolute structure to reality, God told us what to do, eat the matzah. And when are we supposed to eat the matzah? Right now, the night of the Seder. Right? So you have this complete convergence of things. So often we get lost because we walk ourselves into this esoteric world. There's a million things that I could do. And it's like, well, that's true. There is a million things you can do. But the smartest way is look at where you are right now. Look at what's going on around you right now. What time is it? Where are you located? What's the situation? That's what you're supposed to do, because that's the thing that's right in front of you. So if a person thinks about, again, we're speaking in May with coronavirus, right? So a person says to themselves, what should I do? So it's like, well, that's interesting. What do you do? So I just spoke with someone that does sales solutions. He helps people sell stuff. He's like, all the clients are leaving. And it's like, well, slow down a second. The economy's in turmoil, right? So people are going to need to have to sell. Maybe people aren't going to go out and buy, long-term futures in the market, but maybe people that are, medical supply companies or toilet paper institutions or Costco, right? These are companies that are they need to sell. They're going to sell. There's a new market. So pay attention. Look at the world today. See what's going on today and what the opportunities are. So don't say, I don't know what to do. Say, well, what's going on in the world right now? And then it's like, well, I can't go out and meet people face to face. But then we're obviously, again, this is why I'm so thrilled about what H.com is doing, and a lot of other Jewish institutions, and a lot of other institutions in the world. They're taking all this stuff online. It's not like it's over. People are still craving connection, but now it's 10:43 in Minnesota, and people might not be working, so that they can tune into stuff like this. So you have to take advantage. You have to look around at your life. If a person has a family and a person has young kids and they don't want to travel, so then trying to figure out how to become an international speaker. There's a wonderful woman that's associated with a lot of these organizations, and she came on my podcast. She said, when I was raising my kids, I raised my kids. Once my kids left the house, so then I became an international speaker. So I thought to myself, that's so fantastic because that provides context. So rather than get frustrated, you kids are holding me back from my mission, go the other direction and say, I have kids right now. Maybe I don't have an international mission. That, again, just that last piece took me about 35 years to learn and provides the greatest level of comfort in the world. Because if you're able to look at the context of what's going on in your life, that defines what you're supposed to do. That's the Jewish concept of time-dependent mitzvahs. It's not like there's a million things to do. It's not like there's all kinds of options. It's like, look at where you are right now. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're married, if you're single, if you are this, that, the other thing, they're responsibilities, which is the famous line that it says in one of the main famous Jewish books called the Mesilas Yesharim, The Path of the Just. It says you're supposed to look and figure out what are you supposed to do in your world. Your world. Your world. The things that are going on in your life right now. If you have a spouse, you have responsibilities to a spouse. If you have kids, you have responsibility to kids. If you don't have that, you don't have the other thing, then you have other responsibilities. Right? Stop worrying about what you should do theoretically in a long time span of your life or all of the different things that you're not doing, and rather narrow in on the opportunities that are right in front of you. And how do you figure that out? Just look at your life. Just look at your life. Just look at your skill sets. If you hate math, being a CPA is probably not the best move for you, right? Go where you're good. You yourself have to become a unique selling proposition when you go out to the world. So again, I want to thank everyone for listening. We did sort of somewhat rush through this, but the main points again is we live in a world where you can choose your life. You can choose your Judaism, why you should be Judaism. It shouldn't be the kind of thing where you are sitting and being guilted and guilting yourself and guilting your friends and guilting everybody, because we live in a world where everyone is way too intelligent now, and they will simply just, they'll figure it out. They can ask. You can't scare anyone anymore into this kind of stuff, which I think is a great opportunity, right? It means you actually have to articulate, why should I do it? For positive. Think to yourself, what would I do? Why would I be Jewish if I wasn't afraid, right? That's interesting. Why would you do that? So then it comes back to this fundamental idea is one of the things that we offer as a Jew. We have the opportunity to look at is that we have a system, right, where God exists, which is that there's an absolute structure to reality. God told us what to do, which is I know how I can be accomplished. And then he created this idea of contextual life, that instead of you having an esoteric, endless timeline of stuff to do, look at your life, and everywhere you are and for every single situation, there's a responsibility for you to do right now. So you could be completely in line with your purpose. It's complete, again, in the world of Instagram, like everybody hates this, right? Sorry. But like you're supposed to be an individual. So it doesn't matter. You have to like focus in, harbor in. Again, this is the big antidote to chaos, which is called the social media revolution, is that you're actually supposed to be contextual in your own life. So it doesn't matter if someone else has a $25 billion business and they run Tesla. I'm sorry, like everyone wants to be Elon Musk. Like, no, like your life is different than Elon Musk's life. Can you be inspired by him? Absolutely. But like you're supposed to contextualize your life. You have to become, so to speak, the Elon Musk of your life, which is such a crazy idea, because if anyone would actually analyze Elon Musk's life, most of them wouldn't want to do what he does. Most of them wouldn't want to have the life that he has. Most people would not bet the farm and all their financial future and get, like all these pieces. So it's like, you have to be you. Look at your own life. Appreciate your own life. You're only supposed to grow your own life. I think that concept is a very uniquely Jewish idea, because it's based on the idea that there's a God and that God communicated and we know what he told us, and what he told us is contextual to our life right now. Those three things, I feel personally, and again, I'd love the feedback, I think we offer that to the world, that a lot of other approaches, philosophies, mindsets, ideologies don't have those three pieces. And so again, there's a lot of wonderful things out there, but we as Jews can be happy that we have something unique to offer. And even if we don't want to go offer that to our neighbors, we should offer that to ourselves. And that should inspire us to go forward in this amazing time of coronavirus. God's in control. We're having a great time. We're webcasting. I'm wearing sweatpants. Can't do that back in the old days. And we should be happy and be deeply appreciative of the life that we have and the opportunities that are in front of us. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate from the bottom of my heart you listening. And thank you. Take care. That awkward ending when it's like over, but you haven't turned off your stuff yet.